with his purchase. Shifter 66 hopped into the 2RE's cockpit. Without even stopping to familiarize himself with the variant's features, he jumped into the arena and started looking for an opponent. He was eager to take his new mech into a battle. Iron Spirit grouped players with similar skill levels together. Shifter 66 was fairly new and minimally skilled, so the game had assigned him to the Bronze League, which was the lowest league. All new players started there, and they needed several victories in order to be promoted to the Silver League. Most players thought that the Silver League was where the game really started. The Bronze League had so many restrictions that it was hard to earn gold. It was also hard to lose it, though, because there were limits on repair costs. Shifter 66 would only face opponents from his planet, since Iron Spirit didn't allow bronze players to cross star systems. He also couldn't purchase any mechs with ratings above 1 star, a limitation that frustrated many new players. He didn't share their frustration. He was so new to the world of mechs that the few that he had been exposed to got his full attention. His view changed to a welcome screen that asked him to confirm his mech, weapon, and map preferences while the game found a suitable opponent for him. He was paired against a player who went by the name Triceratops. When they had both confirmed their preferences, his view changed again. His mech landed on a grassy hill. Fantasia 2Rs were excellent scouts because of their hair-like sensors, so he scanned his surroundings to see if his opponent was in range. He detected a signal almost immediately. Triceratops was near and wasn't trying to hide. Looking forward to his first battle, Shifter 66 started running. He was shocked when his 2RE stumbled and almost fell onto its back. What the? His voice trailed off when he figured out what the problem was. His mech had such a large backside that it struggled to remain upright when it moved too quickly. He spent a few minutes adjusting his neural interface, hoping to find a posture that would allow the 2RE to run. After a few minutes of trial and error, he discovered that he could move if he bent forward at just the right angle. Bending forward made the mech's rear end look even larger. Who cares what it looks like? At least I can move now. The 2RE had an acceleration booster, and Shifter 66 wanted to see how powerful it was. He activated it and rocketed forward so quickly that he almost lost control. Woohoo! As he grew familiar with the mech's movement, he felt a rush of joy. The 2RE raced up and down the hill, and he could almost feel the wind on his face. He was so overjoyed that he completely forgot about his opponent. His opponent hadn't forgotten about him, though. Hey, Shifter 66, it looks like you're having fun running around. Too bad your mech is so light. My Gronig Howman eats light mechs for breakfast. Triceratops had the wins to back up his claim. KRH Heavy Industries Gronig Howman models offered a good balance between weight, energy, and armor. They looked like gorillas, and they were surprisingly fast sprinters. They struggled against heavier mechs, but pulverized lighter ones. Triceratops had detected the 2RE on his scanners. He had watched its first awkward steps in amusement. But when Shifter 66 had activated the accelerator, he had readied himself to chase after it. He licked his lips as he imagined his mech's powerful arms crushing his opponent. "Will you walk into my parlor?" said the spider to the fly. Shifter 66 didn't even hear the taunt. He was too busy trying to regain control of his mech. It was running so quickly that he was sure it would fall over again. It got closer and closer to the groaning Howman, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to regain control in time to avoid a head-on collision. He couldn't even fire a shot from his pistol. Sighing, he reached for his sword, which was the Fantasia's default weapon. He charged forward. "Come on!" The groaning Howman froze in shock, but it quickly regained its composure and crossed its bulky arms. The sword glanced off its armor, but the 2RE was so out of control that the sword swung back around and pierced its opponent's chest, penetrating the armor and slicing through wires and cables. Triceratops frowned when he realized that his mech had lost 35% of its energy and all the weapons on its left side. Before he could react, the Fantasia crashed into him. Because the groaning Howman was so much bulkier, the Fantasia's upper torso disintegrated, scattering debris in every direction. It fell to the ground, its rear end pointing up. Its head burst open, and a piece of it lodged itself in the groaning Howman's cockpit. What? Triceratops watched in shock as his view screen shattered. The groaning Howman's right arm still worked, So Triceratops tossed the Fantasia's head to the ground. He didn't waste time assessing the damage to his mech. Instead, he lumbered over to his fallen opponent and aimed his arm cannon at the Gemini booster. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he knew that it was important. He commanded his mech to fire, but nothing happened. Unable to fire. Ammunition feed disrupted. No way! Cursing, he clenched his fist and swung it at the Fantasia. Shifter 66 frantically tried to dodge the blow. Damn it! Why isn't she moving? You're done, you little punk! Triceratops landed a punch that shattered the Gemini. The Fantasia instantly ejected a hard-shelled cockpit, which crashed into the groaning Hullman, decapitating it and silencing its pilot. Smoke poured out of the Gemini, and Fantasia's burnt wreckage was scattered around the hill, and the groaning Hullman collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The match was over. Winner, Shifter 66. Huh? Did I win? Shifter 66 grinned as the game sent him his reward. He took a few breaths to calm himself down, and then he reflected on the final seconds of the battle. He had been so desperate to get his mech to do anything that he had pressed every neural button that he could find. He hadn't intended to eject the second cockpit, but it was one of his few remaining options, and it had saved him. He spent most of his winnings on repairs. Higher-rated mechs often required manual repairs that had to be paid in real credits, but Iron Spirit didn't charge its beginners exorbitant fees, so Shifter 66 knew that he would be able to afford the repairs. When his mech was ready to go again, he threw himself back into the arena. Triceratops was stunned. He was only a year older than Shifter 66, and although he spent most of his time playing Bronze League opponents, he had faced several more experienced pilots. He sat in his simulator and shook his head, not wanting to believe that he had lost because of an ejected cockpit. He loaded the replay of the match and fast-forwarded to the final moment so that he could see what had happened. He saw smoke billowing out of the Fantasia. Its rear module was on fire. Its left hatch blew open, clearing the way for the empty cockpit, which was encased in a metal shell. Cockpits normally followed an upward trajectory when they were ejected. Triceratops knew that if he had been just a little more patient, the cockpit would have flown harmlessly past him. But instead, he had stepped into its path trying to punch the Fantasia. He had brought about his own defeat. He felt ashamed that he had lost to such an awkward mech. Who designed that thing anyway? It looks ridiculous. Shifter 66 must be desperate to play if he's willing to bring it into the arena. He opened a window that displayed the Fantasia 2RE's attributes. The numbers meant little to him since he hadn't been studying mechs for very long. But he did find a link to the seller. He clicked on Chasing Cloud's profile, but the account was new and had strict privacy settings. There was very little information available, and there weren't even any other mechs listed. Dead end. He turned his attention to his opponent. Shifter 66 was already playing another match, and he loaded it so that he could watch the action. Who are you? Are you really a newbie? Or are you a pro playing under another name? He had encountered a few experienced pilots honing their skills and beating up on helpless Bronze Leaguers. He watched as the Fantasia 2RE chased after its opponent, a Fantasia 1R. 1Rs were inferior in several ways, but they were lighter and more agile with better short-range mobility. Shifter 66 was struggling to catch his opponent. Triceratops' fight against the Fantasia had happened on a hill, but Shifter 66 was chasing the 1R through a forest. The dense trees were limiting his movement, and he was having a hard time finding a clearing that was big enough for him to use his boosters. Without an acceleration boost, his 2RE was clumsy and sluggish, bogged down under its own weight. The 1R was alert and cautious, and its pilot kept it moving. Knowing that its opponent couldn't catch it, it paused, just long enough to fire its laser blaster. Shifter 66 groaned as the blast hit his mech in the back. Triceratops grinned. A few more direct hits would destroy the 2RE's armor. He saw Shifter 66 reaching for his pistol to defend himself against the 1R's superior firepower, but the 1R easily dodged the shots. Shifter 66 was angry. You jerk! You can't keep running forever. Why don't you stop running around and fight me? The 1R ignored him, so he activated his boosters. The The force of the acceleration sent him straight into a tree. The damage was minor, and he managed to recover fairly quickly. He accelerated again and almost caught up to the 1R. The 1R stepped to the side, and Shifter 66 raced past him, unable to stop. Triceratops knew what was about to happen. The 1R was right behind the Gemini module. "Ha-ha! Watch my signature move!" Shifter 66 slammed his fist down on the secondary ejection button. The Fantasia's spare cockpit burst out in a fiery blast. But instead of following an upward trajectory as it had against Triceratops, it went straight back. Triceratops smirked. It looks like he changed that setting. The 1R was agile enough that it should have been able to step out of the way, but it had taken a step back, almost into a lunge, to chase after the 2RE. It adjusted its stance, but not in time to avoid the blow. The cockpit smashed into its shoulder. The Fantasia 1R was much lighter than the Groening Hallman, so the damage was much more severe. Its shoulder and arm blew apart, and the battered cockpit flew into the trees. "You're mine now!" Shifter 66 sounded delighted. His gamble had paid off. He deactivated his booster, which threw his mech off balance. It tripped and fell. He laughed, and as soon as he was back on his feet, he lumbered over to the damaged 1R. Fantasia 1Rs kept most of their essential systems in their waist, so losing shoulders and arms wouldn't normally impede their movement. Triceratops watched as the 1R ran around in circles and guessed that the pilot wasn't skilled enough to compensate for the damage. The 2RE raised its weapon and fired. It staggered under its own weight, throwing its aim off, but it fired enough shots to pierce the 1R's frame.
"Winner, Shifter 66.
"Ha ha!" He laughed and pumped his fist, and then he dove back into the arena again. Triceratops cursed, but he was happy that he wasn't the only one who had fallen for the 2RE's trick. He watched a few more matches, and he concluded that Shifter 66's celebration was premature. His clumsy mech had a few surprises, but as Iron Spirit started matching him with more seasoned pilots, his cockpit ejection trick stopped working. Experienced pilots knew what the Gemini module was capable of, and they stayed away from it. He still had some luck against heavier mechs, which were less capable of dodging him and more likely to sustain serious damage. Only the heaviest one-star mechs could recover from his attack. His lighter opponents ran circles around him, though, darting in and out and leaving him few opportunities to strike back. Shifter 66 remembered that he had to go home for dinner, so he reluctantly logged out. He had won more matches than he had lost, and he thought that buying the Fantasia 2RE had been one of the best decisions of his life. He wrote Chasing Cloud's name in his address book and went home. Vez checked his notifications and frowned. Lucky rubbed against his leg and he looked down and scratched his head. "I've completed my second mission. I can't believe that someone was dumb enough to buy that thing." Lucky meowed in agreement and shook his rear end. Vez laughed. "At least the crap that you produce is worth something." Since he had received some design points, he went back to the shop and looked more carefully. He had dismissed a lot of what he had seen earlier as pure nonsense. But as he looked through the items again, his eyes widened. I might be able to make my next interest payment after all. He hadn't trusted the system when it had first appeared in his life, but he made up his mind to embrace it, realizing that it could help him. Some designers relied on their degrees to help them start their careers, and others relied on money and connections. He would rely on the system.
You have received a new message. Tutorial Part 3. Mass Production. Difficulty F rank. Prerequisites. Completion of Tutorial Part 2. Description. Designers should never be content only to sell one product. There should be so much demand for your models that people beg for the opportunity to purchase them. Sell 100 virtual mechs of your own creation within a month. Reward: one random 10-year combat mech production license.
He groaned. The system was making things very hard for him.